Well, he's Africa's pride. Africa number one, Bassem Amin, is taking on the world champion Magnus Carlsen. Did you guys know he is a doctor as well? And there you have the world champion comes in. We're going to witness an exciting game of Blitz at the World Blitz Championship 2021. Like always, Magnus adjusts all his pieces there. That's what he likes to do before the game if he has time. Even when he comes late to his games, he spends a few seconds to get them in order. A sip of his water and we are ready to go here. Players shake hands and Bassem opens with 1 e4 and we have Sicilian on the board. Magnus goes for knight c6 and the Rossolimo e6 variation. Bassem takes some time to think what he wants to do and knight g e7. Rook e1 is played and Magnus plays b6. This is very rare. The main move in this position is a6 but Magnus goes for b6. He has played it before against Ali Reza Firouzja, but it has never been tried much before. a6, now the bishop is attacked. You don't want to trade on c6. So Bassem plays his bishop back to a4. Although white has a nice center and he's angling for d4, Magnus has to decide how he is going to deal with this. Maybe a good idea could be bishop b7, but then d4. White gets the center, and so Magnus plays c4, and now d4 will be met with en passant. So that's his idea here. Bassem goes knight a3, attacking the pawn on c4. Magnus's move looks pretty clear here. He can play b5 to hit the bishop and also protect his pawn on c4. You can see that Magnus is taking his time in the opening. It's kind of an unusual position. He plays b5, the bishop comes back to c2, and now knight g6. b3, you can sense that Bassem understands this position very well. He wants Magnus to take on b3, but Magnus puts his knight on e5. Now this knight is not very stable, but at the same time it's very difficult to get rid of it. Suppose you take on e5, knight e5 and play f4, then the knight can jump to d3 already, and that would be a great position for black. So it's not so simple for white. What needs to be done? Bassem takes on c4, Magnus takes back. The pawn on c4 is both a strength as well as a weakness for black. Knight takes, and once again going f4 would allow a check maybe, and then the knight coming to d3. And so right now Bassem has to make a decision. What should he do? Cannot kick the knight away from e5 easily. And so he plays his queen to e2, attacking the pawn on c4, and Magnus instantly defends it. He's also looking in this diagonal's direction. So f4, he can just drop back the knight or even give up a pawn with knight to d3 in the position. And Bassem taking a lot of time. Magnus just looking backwards, trying to see if any of the games have completed already. Look at Bassem's time. He has 1 minute 30 seconds. Goes rook f1. He wants to play f4 here, and Magnus has to decide now what to do, because f4 would push his knight back, and this time he would have to sacrifice a pawn with knight d3, and he goes g5, stopping f4. This is a move that is very risky, but at the same time very ambitious. He's securing all his dark squares here, and Bassem knows that he has to try and open up the position now if he wants to take advantage of the king, which is still on e8. Rook to b1 is such a nice move, putting the rook on an open file here. Magnus can now continue with bishop c5, putting his bishop on a good square. Or he can even keep on attacking with h5, gain more space in the position. And he moves in. This is a very unorthodox position here. You cannot play on simple intuition. You have to calculate here. If you try to get the bishop to a6 by playing a5, then the b5 square is weakened. So both the players have to tread very carefully. What is Magnus going to do next here? He's now come down to 1 minute 23 seconds. He's going below Bassem's time. And we are just 15 moves into the game. Both players will have to play very quickly. Next, bishop b7, and here Bassem has a chance to sacrifice an exchange with rook b7, queen b7 and knight c4. I think he's thinking about it, but then hesitates and plays d4, cd3, bishop d3, the g5 pawn is hanging, bishop takes g5 can come in here. So Magnus has to decide what to do. Does he want to take the bishop on d3 just as yet? No, he first develops his bishop to e7, protecting the pawn on g5. But where is Magnus's king going to go? Once you've played g5, you can't castle easily short. Also going long looks risky. Knight comes to c4. Of course, taking on c4 would mean that white keeps the bishop pair. So Magnus takes on d3 and he short castles. Wow! What confidence in the position Magnus has. Even though he's pushed his pawn to g5, he is ready to short castle and put his king on that side of the board. Both players are below 1 minute, but I think Magnus is quite pleased with his position. He has the bishop pair here, but his king is looking slightly weakened. Bassem is thinking how to take advantage of this. f4 looks like a possibility, but dark squares do get weakened. He goes bishop e3, simply develops his bishop, and Magnus now puts his bishop on c6. He's threatening bishop b5. That could be quite nasty there. What to do? 26 seconds for Bassem, 51 for Magnus. Knight comes back to d2, and now Magnus pushes his pawn to a5, c4 and rook to b8, offering a trade of rooks. Black is slightly better here because of the bishop pair and slightly better pawn structure, but it's not clear yet. Knight b3, and now where does Carlsen move? One possibility is to push with a4, but that could mean that the knight jumps to c5. So he goes queen d6, offering a queen trade. Bassem takes, bishop takes d6, and now you can't take on a5 because e4 is hanging. So f3 is played, defending the pawn on e4. a4 by Magnus, and now knight to d4. Bishop c5, king f2. Well, the position seems to have equalized now. If you move your bishop away from c6, the knight can jump to b5. So Magnus has a tough decision to make. He loves his bishop pair here, but somehow the knight on d4 is quite menacing. He takes on b1, rook takes b1, takes the bishop as well. And now we have an opposite color bishop position, which seems roughly around equal. There's nothing much here for both sides. But Magnus feels that he has a nice bishop here which is protecting everything. So that gives him the right to play. He goes for h6 here, takes, and Bassem brings his rook over. King g6. Generally such positions are drawn, but with Magnus you can never be sure. He's such an endgame genius. King d3. Where is Magnus going to get his breakthrough from? He goes g4 and creates, somehow he wants to create a weakness, and Bassem could have taken the pawn, but he goes f4, gf4, and Magnus sees a weakness on e4, gets his rook and bishop there. f5 has been played, and king comes back. Now the e4 pawn is weak, so rook e1 is played. Magnus gets king f7, e5. The pawns are traded. You don't want to exchange the rook, so rook g8. Now the g pawn can be dangerous. Bassem comes back, rook e1, g3, and now f6 is important. He wanted to play f6, but f6 was the correct move. Now g2. The difference was that there was rook e7 check in between. Now he does not have it. Well, that was the small error there by Bassem. You know, he was almost going to play that move, but he missed it. King d3. And now look at Magnus. He goes king g6. Next move, rook f4 or rook h4 to f1 is the idea. Goes a3, rook g3 check. Bishop comes back, but now he takes the pawn. Bassem was very low on time. He was just having a seconds on the clock. King f2, check here. And Magnus now bringing in his king. King d2, and he spotted it. He has taken on e3, and the pawn on g2 is going to queen. King f2 is a threat now. Magnus comes here, check, king to g3, and there you have it. Bassem gives another check. King moves in, it's going to queen. The players shake hands, and Magnus has won the game. The key moment of the game really was when Bassem played his bishop to d4. Here he had to play f6, and then after g2 he had rook e7 check, king f8 and bishop b4, which would have won. So Magnus had to play king g6, and after rook g7 the game would have ended in a draw. That was not an easy variation to spot with such less time, but Magnus Carlsen has won his game. What an endgame show by the world champion.